There is something sitting inside you right now in your seat today, whether if you're 70 years old or you're 20 years old, there's something in you, in this generation, according to the Bible, that has never been in any other generation that has walked this earth. Daniel, who spoke hundreds of prophetic scriptures that are for this time, for this moment, he spoke about you as a generation. He said you would be strong in God, that you would know your God, and that you would do major exploits. And if you study out the exploits that no other generation, their exploits no other generation has ever done, a lot of what Daniel writes in the book of Daniel is pure prophecy for right now, for this time we're living. And this generation is privileged, these living generations on the earth today are privileged to watch verse after verse come to fruition, sometimes on a daily basis. There's more verses in the Bible about this time that cover this time that we are in than any other time in history. 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy. And there is more prophecy happening, being fulfilled right now than any other time. 2 Peter 3, 1-3, the second epistle, beloved. I now write unto you in both which I stir up your pure minds by way of remembrance, that you be mindful of the words which were spoken by the holy prophets and of the commandment of us, the apostles of the Lord and Savior, knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking in their own lusts. You know, that guy on HBO, Bill Maher, you know who knows who that is? I try not to watch it. I just get mad. He's a scoffer. I watched one time, he had a whole episode where, you know, not talking anything on the South or anything, but he went down south to some good old boy Baptist Christians or whatever, and posed the question to them, well, your Bible says the world is only 6,000 years old. How can you believe that? How can you believe in creation? How can you, if your Bible can't even match up, you know, what's basic fact? And it's like these guys, they didn't have the answer. The Bible doesn't say the world is 6,000 years old. The Bible is very clear that the world is millions of years old, and that's a whole nother sermon in itself. But you know how even people in church are saying, oh, I heard all this when I was a kid. I've said that. When you hear this type of message, you hear about the rapture, the tribulation, you can either respond with, I was hearing that in the 80s when those terrorists killed those Marines in Lebanon. Remember when they drove that truck, killed 200-something Marines? You can scoff at it or you can approach it with humility, but what Peter is saying, when this stuff's going on, you need to be aware. It needs to be in the forefront of your mind. We are at the end. We are at the end. And 2 Peter 3, 4-6, and saying, where's the promise of his coming? Where is it? These aren't atheists saying this. These are Christians saying this. Where's the promise? When I heard that in the 80s. I've said that in the pulpit. Well, I've heard all this. Where's the promise of his coming? For since the Father fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens of old and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that was then was, being overflowed with water, perished. It's disputed here. What he's talking about, in my opinion, he's talking about the flood. Or it could be the world that was then. That's a whole nother sermon. Dinosaurs, etc. Where the Cro-Magnon man come from? Where'd that come from? The Bible explains this. But you compare the wickedness in the time of Noah, what he's talking about, and with today's times, the anti-godliness. You can pull up on YouTube, you know, men cutting off other men's heads, men burning men alive in cages. I'm talking about ISIS, You just pull it up. Anybody can pull it up. 65% of this world we live in, or the people that live in this world, believe in evolution. 65% scoff at creation. And I don't know how this happens, but 20% of people that call themselves Christians believe in evolution. 20%. How does that work? I've got a friend that sends her kids to Catholic school, and they teach evolution. They teach evolution at that particular school. It's a feeder for Benilde. 2 Peter 3, 7 and 8. But the heavens and the earth, which are now by the same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire, against the day of judgment and the perdition of ungodly men. But beloved Christians, don't be ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. God is giving us a sense of his timing. I don't think it's coincidental. When Peter's talking about this timing, he's talking about the end times. He's talking about to have it in the forefront of your mind. If you do the math, if you live 80 years, an 80-year lifespan, it's like 2 hours of God's time. If you're 40 years old, you've lived 1 hour of God's time. 1 hour. Let's go over this mentally. Adam to Abraham was 2,000 years. And so you have 2,000 years from Abraham to Jesus. And you have 2,000 years from Jesus' first coming to the earth to his second coming. His second coming is not the rapture. It's at the end of the 7-year tribulation. When he comes and we come with him, and we're all on horses, and I just hope mine's really tame because I've never ridden a horse. But that's a hard one to picture. Maybe I can ride on the back and hold on to somebody or something, But the sum of these verses, what Peter's talking about, is the time of the Lord's return in these scriptures we just went over. God is giving us a glimpse of his timing. We're at the end of 6,000 years of human history. You can see and feel the earth getting ready for this. The Bible talks about it going through birthing pains. Daniel 12:4 is prophesying regarding these times. He says, at the end, many shall go to and fro. And knowledge shall be increased. He couldn't even picture it. To and fro. You're talking about 10,000 airplanes in the air, people flying clear across the world, 22 hours. So he's talking about to and fro. Knowledge increased. They couldn't even thought about we hold a little thing in our hands and pull up someone's face clear across the world and talk to them. They couldn't have done that 2 blocks away. Knowledge will be increased. And so he's prophesying about what we're doing today. 2 Peter 3:17. Let me warn you, beloved Christians, that knowing these things beforehand, because it's all in the Bible, you should be on your guard. Lest, why? If you're not on your guard, you're going to be carried away by the error of lawless and wicked persons and fall from your own present firm condition, your own steadfastness of mind. So he's talking to mature Christians who are presently firm and steadfast in their mind. And if you are not on guard in these times, knowing these things, we're going to go over these things the next couple of weeks or the next 7 weeks. Be on your guard lest you be carried away by the error of lawless and wicked persons, them slowly changing what you believe. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Making you be quiet. Slowly changing from your steadfastness of mind. He's saying in the earlier verses, it's like the time of Noah. It got so wicked with Noah, there was only one family left that believed in God. And if you read the Bible and you believe everything the Bible said, there were demons having sex with women, female humans, And it was a plan of the devil to taint human blood. And a lot of scholars believe Noah was the last family on earth that was completely pure. Those demons are chained in hell now that did that. But according to hundreds of prophecies in the Bible, God's not ending it on a flood this time. Jesus is coming in the rapture and taking the Christians out of here, and the Antichrist comes along, and the world goes through 3.5 of the worst years it's ever had. We're going to go over that in detail. I know the next couple weeks, we're going to really hit the signs that we are at the end. I'm going to try to convince you that we are close. And then after that, we're going to talk about the rapture, and I'm going to completely convince you that if you just believe in Jesus Christ, you are going in the rapture and not going through the tribulation. The Bible is very clear. I don't care who had a vision out there of themselves, of, us going through the tribulation. The Word of God trumps any vision. It's so clear. When I started studying this, I just thought, how can you believe we're going to go through this? It's so clear in Thessalonians, and we're going to cover these things. Peter is telling you to beware. It's easy to fall at this time. You've got to know the time you're in. There's going to be end time preachers. Tribulation preachers. Think about it, 350 million people disappear. 350 million people. The panic. You don't think the world's going to unite? What are they going to call it? Aliens? Hydrogen bomb? Some new kind of bomb that just disintegrates huge masses of people? Whatever you want to say, they're going to unite, but there's going to be a bunch of people that heard messages like this, and they're going to know. And they're going to say, I know what this is. My sister told me about this. And where are they going to come? They're going to come check out this building. They are. This building is going to be used in the tribulation. These cameras, this TV equipment. And John Hammond will be your pastor. No, I'm just kidding. I pull that out every 3 years, and it's just the best laugh. I can't stop. I have to. You guys forget that I tell that. But in football, with 2 minutes left, the game changes. The game changes. The team behind starts playing with desperation. Their whole offensive game plan changes. The devil knows his time is limited. And his game has changed. In hockey, the team that's losing pull their goalie to get an extra man that can score on the ice. They pull the goalie out of the game. The devil's pulled his goalie because he's going to lose. And, I did a sermon a number of years ago. If you knew the rapture was coming tomorrow, what would you change what you're doing today? In sports, whether it's football, basketball, soccer, any kind of athletic event, the mentality changes when you're running out of time. Peter's saying, change your mental makeup when you're aware of this time. He's saying his exact words, make sure you don't fall from your steadfastness. Make sure you don't walk away from God. I can't go through all the scriptures, but a number of times the Bible admonishes us to preach this to each other, to talk about this. You remember how he starts all this? Stir yourselves up in this. Stir yourselves up in this. And if you had a visitation from an angel, and he said the rapture, nobody else in the world knows this, and the rapture's coming this coming Friday. What would you do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? Think about that. Would you get as many people as you could saved? What would you do? Would it change your mentality? Isaiah 46, 9 and 10. Remember the former things of old. For I am God, there's none else. I am God, there's none like me. Declaring the end from the beginning. And from ancient times, the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand. You know what he's saying right here? You can relax, because I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. Relax. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. He's showing us what's going to happen in the Bible. And so that's what we're going to be going over the next few weeks. What's going to happen? You know, this is 7 weeks of this is like nothing of end times. Dad did a whole year on Revelation one time, a whole year in the 90s. It's so, there's things I'm going to have to leave out. But make sure that we at least know the order and the basics and what's going on, the signs, what to look for. You know, the Bible codes in Ezekiel, you will actually spend a little bit of time. The Bible codes are an in-depth thing, really in-depth. And you know, it would take so many sermons for us to sit here, but there's some basic things. And we're going to show you one of these weeks what these codes, they predict. They talk about ISIS, call them Daesh. They talk about the Paris attacks. All this stuff is in there. It actually predicts when Israel becomes a nation in 1948. This is why the Bible is such a deep book. And, you know, we're just beginning to figure out the very beginning of it. You know, I did a teaching on this once, but look, you know the first 10 male names in the Bible? You know how you go through those chapters, so-and-so begat so-and-so? I used to skip those chapters. I did. But listen to this. Genesis, the first 10 names in the Bible, Genesis 5:3. Adam lived 130 years and begot his son in his own likeness. Adam, in the Hebrew language, is translated man. The second name, Genesis 5:6. Seth lived 105 years and begot Enos. Seth means appointed in the Hebrew language. Genesis 5:9. Enos lived 90 years and begat Canaan. Enos means mortal in the Hebrew language. Genesis 5:12. And Canaan lived 70 years and begat Mahalalel. Canaan means sorrow. 5:15. Mahalalel lived 65 years, begat Jared. Mahalalel means the blessed God. Genesis 5:18. Jared lived 162 years and begot Enoch. Jared means shall come down. Who's heard this? Raise your hand. This came from a guy named Chuck Missler, originally, I believe. But at Genesis 5:21, Enoch lived 65 years, begot Methuselah. Enoch means teaching. Genesis 5:25, Methuselah lived 187 years, begat Lamech. Methuselah means his death brings. Genesis 5:28, Lamech lived 182 years and begat a son. Lamech means despairing. Genesis 5:29, and he called his name Noah. This same shall comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord hath cursed. Noah, the 10th name, means rest. You add up those meanings, the first 10 male names in the Bible, and God's already telling a story. You add it up, man is appointed mortal with sorrow, and the blessed God shall come down teaching. His death brings despairing rest. That's something. See, even when you're reading the names, you should ask the Lord, those beget chapters, something's going into you. Something's going into your consciousness, to your spirit, man, is receiving something. And so the point I'm trying to get across by taking this little side trail, there's so much of the Bible that hasn't been figured out. God just gave the whole plan of redemption in 10 names in a row. The first 10 male names mentioned in the Bible, you get the whole plan of redemption just by looking up the meaning of their names. It's just a coincidence. Just a coincidence. He put it in order like that. Like we just read in Isaiah. He's saying, okay, you can relax. I'm God. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen thousands of years before it happens. 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy. For every verse there is for the first coming of the Lord, when he was born in Bethlehem in a manger. For every verse that predicts his first coming, there are 300 verses in the Old Testament that predict his first coming. There are 2,500 verses that talk about his second coming. 2,500 verses. God gave 2,500 prophecies of signs and things that would be happening, of things that would happen on the second coming of the Lord in the end times, so that we would know, we would be sure when we're at the end, so that we would pay attention and remain steadfast, so that we would be ready for what's coming and looking for what's coming and not lose heart. Peter is saying, if you're not up on this stuff, if it is not in the forefront of your mind, you will lose heart. You are writing your resume right now. In this little 2 hours of God's time, you're writing it for what you're going to be doing in the millennium. It's not socialism. It's not communism. Yeah, I was just reading about a doorman in Psalms. Hello, sir. Nice to meet you. Come on in. Yes, thank you. Yep. There's doorman. You're writing your resume. You could be operating a weed eater or ruling a government in the millennium by what you do in this 2 hours of God's time. And we'll be talking about the millennium in a few weeks from now. You know, about 60 years ago, they found another scroll in the Dead Sea area of Israel of the book Isaiah. And they thought they'd just take this scroll and match it up for the King James, with the King James, and just see. Thousands of years later, how much has changed? It was almost word for word for today's King James. Word for word. And we're going to run through some of the prophecies, predictions, although they're not predictions because they're all come true, as you'll see when we start to get to the end time prophecy. Let me rattle off a few of these verses that were written thousands of years before about the first coming of Jesus and his stay on this earth that were fulfilled. 13 of them. He'd be born in Bethlehem of the tribe of Judah. He'd be preceded by a messenger. He'd be betrayed by his friends. He'd be given away 35 pieces of silver, for 35 pieces of silver. The silver would be thrown into the temple to buy a potter's field. Judas bought a field and hung himself in it. He'd ride into Jerusalem on a colt. They'd pierce him in his side. They'd gamble over his robe. He'd be buried in a rich man's tomb. He'd be crucified among thieves. His body would not see decay. He'd be raised from the dead, and he would be quiet before your accusers. The odds of these 13 prophecies, and there were 300 of them. 13 prophecies I just read coming true as they did. Can we just put that number on the screens? The odds of all 13 of these being written thousands of years before and actually coming true is, it's just coincidental. It's all one big coincidence. The number is 480 billion times a trillion and a billion. That's not even a number. I mean, no, I'm always going to say that. Never mind. So we're just talking about the first coming of Jesus. But see, the first part of this series, we're in the time of his second coming and the 2,500 different scriptures regarding the second coming of Christ. And it's important when it is the end, we know it's the end. It's strong in our minds. We are on God because there's going to be no time more wicked or no time more powerful. God's glory would have never touched this earth to the extent that it's going to touch this earth in the end. in the end. You know, Jesus gives a lot of signs in Luke 21, 6 through 36, and we'll go through this, you know, and a bunch of other scriptures more in depth. But, you know, a lot of guys take this and they preach it as the rapture. He's not talking about the rapture here. In Luke 21, 6 through 36, he's talking about his second coming. The rapture, we go up, Antichrist comes in. Then you've got 7 years, right? He walks into Jerusalem, wants everybody to worship him. It looks like Israel's going to fall, and then, you know, we show up on horses with Christ. And it's a big, booming scene. And so you have to keep in mind who he's talking to here. These are Jews asking him, for these things which you behold, the days will come in which there are not left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. He's talking about the temple. And that was already fulfilled. 39 years from that point, the Romans came in and leveled the temple, burned it to the ground. They burned it so they could melt that gold and get all that gold out of there. And then they asked the master, but when shall these things be? What sign will there be when these things shall come to pass? Well, you know, his second coming's only 7 years away from when we go. So you can take some of these things, and some of these things you can't take. He said, don't be deceived. Many shall come in my name, saying, I am the Christ. And the time draweth near. Don't go after them. So he's talking to the Jews, because they're going to be going through such hell in those 7 years. And you're going to have dudes having miracles saying, I'm Jesus. I'm Jesus, follow me. And is anybody doing that right now? Nobody's doing that right now. You don't see anybody on TV saying they're Jesus selling prophecies at 5 a.m. All right? But that will be going on, and there'll be such desperation that people will follow these people. He's saying, you know, it used to be, you shall hear wars and rumors of wars and commotions. That's verse 9. Don't be terrified. These things must first come to pass. It used to say rumors of wars, and I was just thinking about that, how is Russia in the Ukraine or not? They say they're not. They've got troops that aren't in uniform that are sitting in about 15% of the Ukraine. Ukraine swears they're there. Russia says, no, that's not us. Rumors of wars. Then said he unto them, nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. Great earthquakes. We're going to talk about that. The earthquakes from the 80s compared to now. I mean, there's so many earthquakes on this earth in these days, they don't even get reported every day. Every day. And it was not the case. Anybody ever heard it? It says, great signs shall there be from heaven in verse 11. Anyone heard of this? Remember the Star of Bethlehem? Yeah. Okay. That's coming back. Gee, what a coincidence. The Star of Bethlehem is going to show up again. We're going to show it to you in the coming weeks. But before all these things, they shall lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues, into prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. And it shall turn to you for a testimony. Settle it in your hearts, not to meditate before what you shall answer. For I will give you a mouth and wisdom which all your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay or resist. You'll be betrayed by parents, brethren, kinfolk, friends. Some of them, they shall cause you to be put to death. No, there's so many things I'm not able to cover. Well, I was just in Israel for a couple weeks, and we had the interns over there because I feel very important to educate the younger generation on the land and the truth, opposed to what you see on the news. And so, you know, and I was talking to some very knowledgeable Jewish men, and they believe, you know, I asked them about Ezekiel 38 war. There's a war in Ezekiel 38. Russia's in Syria right now. Russia leads the charge with Turkey and a number of other countries surround Israel. And, you know, what happens is, see, my mother believes we're going to see this. If you see this war, you better know we are so close. But a lot of people, I'm on the other side, I don't believe we're going to see this war. I believe it's going to happen immediately after the rapture, and Putin's going to take advantage of the whole situation and say, let's go get some of all these people disappearing. But whatever happens, Russia's decimated in Ezekiel 38, their army, because it's an Old Testament type saving of Israel. Rocks on fire from heaven level this 1 million man army. Crush it. And my mother thinks it's before the rapture, because then the Arab and Muslim world will say, maybe Allah's not God. Do you get what I'm saying? They really believe Allah's going to deliver them in the end. Well, what about now? Think about the harvest that comes in from Ezekiel 38. There's another war in the Psalms in the 80s. Psalm 80-something. It's nothing but a war, and it's just the Muslim nations, no Russia. Just them, one more time, they gang up. And it was the last message my mom's twin sister, my aunt, ever preached on this earth. And she shocked the world because no one had ever heard of this and said, this is different. This is not Ezekiel 38. We will see this. And so most of the Jews believe it's a succession of wars leading up to the end. And he said, but the thing is, if you're a skeptic, if you're like, somebody just brought you to church and maybe you grew up in evolution, this is just all new to you. Just bear with me here. That day when probably hundreds of millions leave this earth, children too, leave this earth, you know what it is. You know. And one thing you don't do is you never accept a chip or a mark in your forehead or your wrist. Because if you do, you're basically saying, there is no God. Right? The Bible speaks, I'm getting ahead of myself because this is detailed stuff. There are going to be many people that say, oh no, I know what this is, I'm not taking the mark, and they die for it. They die for it in Revelation. Because they realized, because they heard messages like this. And so, he says, ye shall be hated of all men. He's talking to the Jews, for my name's sake. But there shall not a hair on your head perish. In your patience possess ye your souls. When ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, you know that the desolation thereof is nigh. He's talking about Armageddon. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains. Oh, there's some signs on this one. I just want to tell you so bad, but you have to come back. Let them which are in the midst depart out, and let them which are in the countries enter therein. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe, he's talking about the tribulation now, unto them who are with child. He's telling the Jews, you probably don't want to get pregnant during the tribulation. Woe unto them in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land. They shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be led away captive. Now he's dropping back to when the Babylonians took them. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles. He's dropping back in time here. Jerusalem was trodden down by the Gentiles, by the Romans in 70 AD, flattened until the time of the, he's talking about Jerusalem, until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Well, they won back Jerusalem in 1967. So that should tell you our time, the time of the church, the time of the Gentiles is almost fulfilled. They've got Jerusalem back. It is no longer trodden down. In 1967, Israel cried to the world as Syria, Egypt, and Lebanon just built up. It was between an 800 and 1 million man army. And no one said a thing, so Israel attacked. And that's where they got the Golan Heights. That's where all this disputed land is. So Israel attacks, gains back Jerusalem, gets to the Golan Heights, gets all kinds of land, right? And now the United Nations just voted last week, they are occupiers. You know, that's prophesied in Ezekiel. That very vote was a prophecy. God is speaking, and we're going to go over this stuff. And so, but the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled when they've got Jerusalem back. There shall be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars. Dad's talking about the blood moons. There was an Oral Roberts prophecy about 10 years ago about this stuff, but I mean, we're going to show you some stuff. I want to show you John has a vision in Revelation. When he's having the vision of Revelation, he sees a woman in the stars with a crown pregnant with the moon. Well, guess what? That moon's real close to her stomach right now. There's an app, you can look this up. The stars are aligning exactly the way John described them in Revelation. And we're going to show you this. If not next week, the week after. And then shall they see the Son of Man coming in the cloud with power and great glory. See, that's not the rapture. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up, lift your heads, for your redemption draws near. And he spake to them in a parable, and he said, behold the fig tree and all the trees. It's just like, you guys, if you want to know, like Paul's thorn. You want to know what's Paul's thorn? Well, look up thorn in the flesh everywhere else in the Bible, and you'll see it's always a man. Paul's thorn in the flesh was not an eye disease. It was a man. And that's how, if you look up fig tree, 98% of the time it's written in the Bible is referring to Israel. And it's not coincidental. He says right here, and most of you have heard this, behold the fig tree, when they shoot forth, 1948, the world said, this is your land. The world gave them that land. Don't forget about that now. And all this news. The world gave it to them, said, you are officially a nation. And when it shoots forth the words of Jesus, you have to know summer is near. Summer is near. 1948, it shot forth. Israel became a nation. Likewise, when you see these things come to pass, know the kingdom of God is near at hand. This, verse 32, this generation will not pass. You guys, you know what that means? Everybody that was born in 1948 is 69 years old right now. They're not going to pass. We're going to see this stuff. The words of Jesus himself. I'm just trying to get you thinking about it. Get you interested in it. Make sure we all know the exact order of things. We're even going to talk about the millennium because it's disputed. You know, a lot of people think we're down here in the millennium with the Jews. Oh, you're so well taught. I think Mac Hammond may have been talking to you. Right? And we're just going to, a lot of times I'm going to give you both opinions and just let you decide, right? But I'm excited about this. And so next week we're going to hit the signs hard next week. And I'm excited. I'm really excited to do that. And, but the main thing is just to get you on guard and get you thinking about it, because Peter said he said flat out, straight up, if you're not thinking about it, you're risking falling away because of the evil time.